The Sand People of Tatooine have garnered a fierce reputation in the Star Wars universe. From their first appearance on screen, savagely attacking Luke Skywalker and company. And most remember the Tusken Raiders' entire camp being slaughtered at the hands of a heartbroken Anakin Skywalker due to the brutal mauling and torture his mother faced in their care. Yet, in other media, most recently in the Book of Boba Fett, the Sand People have been shown as a proud, nomadic clan, hardened by the unforgiving nature of the desert sands, its lack of resources, and the dangers that dwell therein, actively vilified by their wary and sometimes opportunistic co-inhabitants. So, in this video, I want to delve into a particular incident in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic in which you can choose to kill or aid the Sand People, and why wiping them out may actually be the most humane course of action.
Combat mode active!
To form a solid argument of why the Sand People need to be stopped, we must first explore who wants to stop them and their motives. When heading into Anchorhead and meeting the local Zerka representative, she will be seen arguing with a Duros about the Sand People problem. In fact, you cannot even leave Anchorhead without a Zerka hunting license, as it is deemed too dangerous for anyone to venture into the desert wastes, as the Sand People hunting parties have been butchering the local miners, forcing the Zerka to stop unprepared travelers from leaving the city confines. The Zerka representative will then offer a sizable bounty for gaffy sticks for each Tusken slain.
The Sand People are becoming a problem. They destroy our sandcrawlers and kill our miners. One particular tribe is the worst. It's as if their chieftain has decided to wage war against us. I would like their attacks terminated. Bring me their gaffy sticks as proof. If you agree to do this, I'll give you a hunting license now and pay a bounty for each stick later. I'll give a bonus for the chieftains.
Now, reflexively, this seems to be an ethically repugnant task, bulldozing the natives out of the way so Zerka can harvest more resources. Congruently, the Zerka have been seen on multiple worlds already as an amoral entity throughout the game. Not only are they allied with the Sith, but they frequently use underhanded means for their ends, such as stealing from rivals, acting on purely financial motivations, employing the use of violence and slavery, hiring mercenaries, smuggling weapons, etc., and will often ask the player to perform some jobs which they would generally consider dirty or beneath them.
I'd feel guilty if the money weren't so good. Come back here when you've got the glands and I'll pay you.
Hence why outside is a local detractor. The Duros, who were seen inside arguing with the representative, informs you that there is actually a peaceful solution and urges you to parley with the natives, forgoing the violent methods of the Zerka, who have proven time and again to be morally bankrupt. Now, superficially, this seems like a no-brainer. Save the poor desert dwellers, net some well-earned light side points, and call it a day, right? Furthermore, historically, an ongoing motif that has been stressed by George Lucas in Star Wars movies is that those who side with nature eventually triumph over insurmountable odds against those who abuse science and machinery for the advancement of their evil empire. So, we have clearly established that the Zerka are generally evil and that they are interlopers extracting resources. Which begs the question, how could one ever argue in good conscience to slaughter the Sand People and that is the right thing to do? Well, the beauty of a well-written RPG such as KOTOR is that not everything is black and white or light and dark as George Lucas's space opera, which I will attempt to prove shortly. However, first, to get a proper grasp of the moral buoyancy of the situation, we mustn't take either party by their initial word and instead dispassionately assess the facts. To gather some facts, we must first get the other side of the story directly from the Bantha's mouth and speak to the very Sand People's chieftain who we are contracted to execute. When meeting the chieftain of the Sand People in their enclave, we learned that he had unsurprisingly slaughtered the trespassing Zerka and others that encroached on his territory. The deserts, we learned, the Sand People see as sacred ground. Yet, in the negotiations, he doesn't care that the miners are not indeed soldiers, but does agree to cease most indiscriminate attacks on settlers. That is, if he is given a moisture evaporator, which does seem fair and reasonable for all parties. That is, until we learn there are many holes in the leader's logic that begin to bubble into view when you're given leave to speak to their local historian. Notably, we learned that the historian says speaking a word in error of the Sand People's sacred history is blasphemy, punishable by death. And the reason that this is so worrying is not just the zealotry in which they follow this history, but the danger in unquestionably following this doctrine in an ever-changing landscape. But how did the Sand People form these extreme ideals about outsiders? Well, to summarize, the Sand People were regular spacefaring colony who utilized technology in their everyday lives on Tatooine, which used to be a lush green planet, much to our surprise. These peoples were later brutalized by an ancient race, later revealed as the Rakatan, and fire rained down on the planet from the skies so heavily that they were forced to hide in caves for generations. Emerging as xenophobic sand peoples, they now revered the new barren wastelands and would attack and kill all those who opposed their now fanatical narrow worldview that technology is evil and must be destroyed at all costs. So, does this make them right? Worshipping the sands they stand on after being brought low by a war? Or I dare say, is this belief worth holding sacred over lives of those around them? Let's look at the tangible negatives of this line of thinking, outside the fact even speaking the history of the Sand People incorrectly by one word would get you killed. So forget about trying to show the Sand People the errors of their ways with logic or reasoning. You can't even speak about it. The hypocrisies of the chieftain were highlighted by the fact not only did he demand that we acquire Zerka technology to aid his people, to help them relocate, which is a taboo in their culture, he also made use of stolen turrets and mines from the Zerka as security outside of their enclave. He then justified himself as Zerka's presence forcing it upon him. And yet, Zerka has demonstrated that they pose little threat to the Sand People, being forced to huddle in Anchorhead lest they be destroyed. Most of the folks slaughtered that we met out in the desert weren't some fanatical Zerka corporate elites, but rather simple miners, some of which we saved thanks to the Zerka hunting license, and they would explain their plight.
Just that they attack everything on sight. Well, I suppose they don't attack each other, but any outsider is as good as dead. The company tried to arm us and even set up remote self-powered turrets on the mining route, but that just made things worse. We're not soldiers. They still kill us and then take our weapons off our corpses. They even had the Jawas disable the turrets and set them around their enclave. They use whatever they scavenge. They seem to hate our technology, but they love to turn it against us. That goes for blasters and turrets too, I guess. It's like a fortress now. I don't know how you're going to break through all of that. Me, I'd sneak in. Well, actually, I'd just get back to Anchorhead.
In fact, we were indiscriminately assaulted by multiple Sand People hunting parties out in the dunes. The Sand People also took several prisoners from their attacks that they had no need of, including Jawas, basically anybody that they hypocritically deemed blasphemous in their reliance on technology and in breach of their zealot ways. The chieftain also doesn't need us to bring him moisture evaporators to locate his people. He's proven that he could achieve much on his own merits and with the technology his people had stolen on their own. But perhaps worse, he's begun to grow reliant upon the technology he claims to hate and makes no promise that he won't attack Anchorhead or its citizens again.
Translation. He says that will never happen, Master. Ignorant outsiders continually desecrate their most reverential customs. This will always demand a response, an attitude I can respect. Protocol. From his perspective, a reduction is already a large step. It is doubtful you will get agreement on much more than that.
In fact, the Zerka didn't want the conflict in the first place. They would be happy to rid themselves of the ambushes and were looking at leaving the planet, which the chieftain knew that the Zerka would leave due to the near impossible to excavate resources. Yet he still chose to attack them versus educate them. He even goes as far as to ruminate on the fact that they weren't the first to try and excavate resources, nor will they be the last, knowing that outsiders would always eventually fail and give up in their mining operations. But if instead we decided to destroy the Sand People threat outright, not only would we save the Zerka, but future generations of peoples, perhaps corporations, perhaps innocents that come to the world in look of a better life. Sure, it's not great they're encroaching on the Sand People's territory, but the Sand People have shown to be resourceful and nomadic. Their logic and bloodlust is mired in hypocrisy that cannot be justified to continue. In conclusion, holding life as sacred, if we killed the dozen or so Sand People in the Enclave, we are saving lives effectively. They would never stop attacking outsiders. But how many would we save? We don't know. Is it tens, hundreds, thousands over time? If their sacred historian is the only person who can relay the Sand People history, by destroying them, then it will be forgotten as others cannot repeat it, and therefore presumably breaking the cycle. And start something fresh? These are all questions that I leave to you, but I truly believe that the Sand People threat is worse left unchecked. And it's as Creo once said, sometimes you can do more harm with an open palm than a closed fist.
Agreement. That is probably the most efficient course of action. This will be enjoyable. Prejudice set to maximum.
I just want to say a massive thank you to Twinodoom. His comment actually inspired a lot of the writing on this video. I was already working on it, but he left this great piece on my Sand People history video, which is linked on screen, and you should watch if you're interested in hearing the entire history of the Sand People, even though it technically led to me advocating for their slaughter. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more Dark Lore.